How are you still hungry?
Takes a lot of energy to summon my chi.
Hello everyone and welcome, I'm Mr. Rand Comics and thank you for joining me in yet another video. Today I wanted to talk about signed comic books. Whether they're an investment, who you should get to sign your comic books, how much you should pay to get your comic book signed, and whether you should get them signed overall. And I'm going to talk about all these things and I'm going to throw in some of my signed books that I've had. So for those of you who come to my channel to look at my comic books, don't get too bored. So I'll show you my signed books and we'll talk about when it's worth getting a book signed and when it's not, and whether overall they are an investment. Just wanted to say sorry for not uploading a video yesterday. I've had a very busy schedule with lots to do, and giveaway details will be at the end of this video, so be tuned to be in a shot at winning a free comic book. So, starting off, we'll get the elephant in the room out of the way. What if I want to get a comic book signed for my own personal collection? Well, if that's the case, then get it signed. Only you can say whether a comic book should be signed if you want it for your own personal reasons. I mean, these two here are an example of me getting comics signed for no sort of investment purpose. This is Captain Britain and MI13 issues 4 and 8. These are just really nice covers that I got signed. These issues hold no significance whatsoever, and I got them both signed by Paul Cornell, who wrote these books. I got them signed by him for absolutely free, which was fantastic, and in a pub in London as well. So that was pretty cool. Got to have a conversation with him and everything like that. But the point here being that whether it's free, whether it's going to cost you £100, if you want a comic book signed for your own personal collection, no one can tell you whether that's worth it or not. The only time you should really look for advice is if you think you're going to be selling it on at any point. So yeah, I got these ones signed for absolutely free, and I was very happy with those. This cover especially is an absolutely beautiful, fantastic cover, which I'm very happy to have. And that leads me on to a point of, if you get comic books, if you get the opportunity to get your comic book signed for free, then should you? And I think unless you're like strongly against the idea of getting your comic book signed, which I know a lot of people are, they don't like having their comics signed, I think you should go for it, because I love getting my comics signed. I mean, these are some more comics that I got signed for absolutely free. These are 4 comic books, the 4 parts of Great Lake Avengers Misassembled, all signed by Dan Slott. This was the re-emergence of Squirrel Girl from obscurity, which was absolutely fantastic. I'm very happy to get them. I got all these signed for free because I went to London Super Comic Con 2017. Now, when you go to Comic Cons, if it's a comic book specific Comic Con, and I say that because a lot of Comic Cons these days are just about pop culture, anime, TV, movies, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but Comic Cons for the most part aren't about comic books these days. But London Super Comic Con, if you wanted to go for one for comics, that's definitely one to go to. Almost all of the creators sign for free, and Dan Slott is one of those. He will sign as many books as you want for free, which makes the queue times extremely long, but he's a fantastic guy, and he will talk to you while he's doing it. He's a brilliant guy to talk to. I got this one signed down here, this one here, this one here, and this one just here. But if you can get your comic book signed for free, I'd say definitely go for it, unless you're one of those people who doesn't like it obscuring the cover. Like, I can understand why a lot of people wouldn't like someone writing on their comic book right there. Now, if this does bother you, but you wanted to get your book signed anyway, say if you were on the fence, what I would suggest doing is get them to sign it anyway. Get them to sign it on the front page or something. For example, I also got Dan Slott to sign just at the top here. Most creators will be more than happy to do this. And if you don't want it to obscure the cover, but you also want their mark on the book, then I'd say this is a really good path to go down, because I can't see why any of them would have a problem with that. And if you wanted to get your book graded as well, grading companies will recognise that the comic is still signed. You don't have to get it on the cover at all. And just to show off one more book, which I got signed for my own personal collection, not for investment reasons, is Ultimate Fallout issue 4. Now, this is a second printing, as many of you will probably know. It's the second printing of the first appearance of Miles Morales, and I just thought this was such a beautiful cover to sign. And this is a comic which I'm not going to get graded or anything like that, because it just presents so nicely. I might get it framed, because I already have it on my wall, and getting it framed on my wall would just be fantastic. It's one of my favourite comic book covers. The signature just looks absolutely fantastic in it. The only thing that could have made it better is probably in gold pen. And while this book, if it got graded, I probably wouldn't get higher than a 9.0 because of a load of spine ticks down here. They don't show when presenting. So, like I say, if it's for your own personal comic book collection, or you get the opportunity to get your book signed for free, I'd say by all means go for it. Yeah, 100%. Which leads me on to my next point. How much does a signed comic actually increase the value by? Now, most of you clicking on this video will probably be here for that point. You'll probably be thinking, okay, here's an opportunity for me to get my comic book signed. It's going to cost me X amount of money and I want to get resale value on it. This is very difficult because most of the time it really depends on the situation. And I do think a lot of the time when it comes to things like CGC, signature service and things like that, I don't think it will be worth it a lot of the time. But I'll get more onto that point later. I'm going to show you a few books which I bought already signed, and I'm going to tell you exactly how much I paid for them. So you can try and get an idea by relating them to these books of how much it would actually cost you. Now, the first one I'm going to show you is an Edge of Venomverse issue 1, first printing. I'd say it's in near mint condition. Like, I could send that off to grading and probably get a 9.8 on it. This has a certificate of authenticity having been signed by Matthew Rosenberg here, and that is the writer, and his signature is right there. I got this when Edge of Venomverse first came out, so I'm going to talk in UK prices here, but I will show on the screen the dollar prices for all American viewers. This book, when I was buying it, the book unsigned version was selling for about £3.30 UK price. I got this book £8 including shipping and handling. So I didn't go to a store and pick up this book. I bought this book online, cost me £8 all in, signed by the writer. So taking everything into account, taking in postage and everything like that, this signature, this little piece of writing here cost me about £3. So if you're taking your books down to your local city or your local store to get signed and everything like that, if it's literally just by a writer, and keep in mind, this is with a certificate of authenticity, which I'll get onto later about whether you do or don't have one of those. It's all a bit, how much are you going to spend having to go down there, even if you don't have to pay for the signature, even if you're getting it for free. If it costs you £5 to get to the place where the signature is happening, and you manage to get a resale value of £3, you've made a loss on that. So a lot of the time with these insignificant issues, because Edge of Venomverse is an insignificant issue, it doesn't really matter. This next one is a slightly more significant issue, but still by no means a key issue. Oops, that is not good. That is not good at all. Holy crap. Leading on to a slightly more significant issue, which still by no means is a key issue. House of M, issue 1. This is signed by Bendis and Koipel, which I'll show here and here. The writer and artist. This book is probably in about an 8.0 because of things like spine ticks and stuff, and it doesn't have a certificate of authenticity. I got this book for £6 posted. I don't know how much a House of M goes for these days, but I can't see it going for much more than a couple quid actually. So these two signatures here cost about, I don't know, £4, £3 together. That's about £2 each. That's how much those signatures cost. So again, if you got these signed at a free event, you know, very well, that's good. Maybe you've made a small amount of profit, but getting comic books signed for resale value, I'm not 100% sure on it. It's pretty risky, in my opinion. And another book which I bought already signed, Shirtless Bear Fighter issue 1, which has appeared in quite a few of my videos recently. I got this book double signed with the certificate of authenticity at the back here from Midtown Comics. Jody Layhap and Sebastian Gerner, the writer and artist, both signed this. I got this book for £10, postage included. So let's say Shirtless Bear Fighter still costs about £4 for me to get. Those signatures were still about £3 each. So I don't know what the general consensus of how much signatures are actually worth these days. I actually love getting my books signed. I love having signed books. I love the creator having their marks on it. But for people who want investment value, for the most part, I picked these books up really, really cheap, and you can pick up signed books really cheaply. So how much a signed comic increases the value by really, really does depend. Obviously, there are massive exceptions to things like this. One of them, of course, being Stan the Man Lee. Whoa, Stan Lee. Stan Lee signatures. So this is a book which I've also shown off quite a bit recently. Fantastic Four, issue 53, signed by Stan Lee. This is the first appearance of Claw and the second appearance of Black Panther, with the origin of both of those characters. This book came back in an 8.0 and I got it signed by CGC. Now, Stan Lee signatures, he used to do signings for free, and I wish I was into comics while he was doing that, but unfortunately I was not. Stan Lee now charges about £100 per signature for his books, and I think that translates to roughly $120. That is $120 for a single signature. Now that is an extortionate price. That is an absolutely ridiculous price. But when it comes down to it, Stan Lee comic book signings are probably one of the safest signature investments you can make. You get Frank Miller signings costing something like £80 sometimes, and that may not be everywhere, but I've just seen opportunities to get my book signed by Frank Miller for £80, and that seems extortionate. So Stan Lee, getting your book signed by Stan Lee for £100, you can almost always make a profit on something like that, especially if it's verified, which still I will get onto later. Stan Lee signatures, I can't see going down in value. But then that also leads me on to talking about what creators should you get signed on a comic book. Who should you get to sign your book? Stan Lee is one of those people who will literally sign anything. I have seen on eBay Batman books signed by Stan Lee, and it makes me hurt. It genuinely does. When you're getting a book signed, if you're getting it signed by personal reasons, go for it. If you have a Batman book and you say, oh, I wish Stan Lee would sign this Batman book because I want it, I want to keep it, go for it. But if you are getting Stan Lee or any other artist or writer or creator for that matter to sign a comic book because you want to sell it on later, make sure that they at least have something to do with the book. In most cases, make sure that they either wrote or drew or inked or at least lettered, perhaps even edited the comic book that you want them to sign. But I'm going to use Stan Lee as a specific case. There are people who will get Stan Lee to sign literally anything. And let's say if you wanted to get Stan Lee to sign a modern Spider-Man comic book that he had nothing to do with. Let's say the first appearance of Silk. If you wanted Stan Lee to sign the first appearance of Silk, I could understand that to an extent. I mean, he played a massive role in he created Spider-Man. He co-created Spider-Man. If you're getting him to sign a book which has a character that he created in it, that I can understand to an extent. What won't usually get you profit is when you get Stan Lee to sign a New Mutants issue 98. That doesn't make much sense. People aren't going to pay massive amounts of money for his signature on... Well, actually, you know what, maybe they might. I'm not even sure. Stan Lee's signature is such a massive thing that you could probably get him to sign anything and make a profit. But when it comes down to that Batman scenario, him signing that book, if it was a nice DC Golden Age book, if you got Stan Lee to sign that, it would probably go down in value. So you've just got to be careful who you get to sign it. Don't just get anyone because they have a big name to sign any comic, because that just wouldn't make sense. And that leads me on to movie stars and TV stars. People who've had nothing to do with the comic book, but played that character in a TV show or movie. Now, the only scenario where I have had someone sign a book like this is in one of my favourite comic books that I have because of this signature. The Incredible Hulk issue 273. Not a significant comic book by any means. This comic book is worthless on its own. It's probably worth about £2, if that. If I sold it on eBay, I'd be lucky to get £2 for it. But I went, because I thought this was a fantastic cover, I got it signed by Lou Ferrigno at London MCM Comic Con May 2017. It cost me £30 to get him to sign this. But this isn't something that I want to sell on. This is something for my personal collection, which brings me back to the first point. I really wanted him to sign it, and I don't plan on selling it on. So I'm very happy to have this in my collection. Lou Ferrigno played the Hulk in that 1980s television show, by the way, for anyone who wasn't aware of that. Now, TV stars and movie stars usually charge extortionate prices for their signatures. More than Stan Lee in a lot of cases. I mean, I've seen Chris Hemsworth signatures. He charges hundreds for them. It's ridiculous. And this is something I wanted to ask you guys about. Do you think getting a movie star or TV star to sign a comic book increases the value? Or do you think it decreases it? Because if you got, let's say, Finn Jones to sign a copy of Marvel Premiere issue 15, the first appearance of Iron Fist, I genuinely reckon that would decrease the value of that book. Because it doesn't even matter that Iron Fist isn't a highly rated television show. He had nothing to do with that book. He is just representing that character, and people aren't going to pay the same prices that they would for a nice copy of Marvel Premiere 15 now that it's got a scribble on it by someone who they think doesn't have anything to do with that book. So when it comes to movie stars and TV stars, I think that you should be really careful when getting them to sign key issues. But when it's not a key issue, for example, Anthony Mackie is going to be at London MCM Comic Con October. Now, he is charging £45 per signature, and these are issues which are not key issues. Now, I'm not getting any sort of signatures or anything like that. Neither of these books are in key or good condition, but this is something I wanted to give an example of. Neither of these books are key issues. They are sort of semi-significant. This is the first solo story of Falcon, and this is the first issue of Falcon that bears his name on it. Well, this is the first Falcon issue, if you know what I mean. Falcon issue 1. Now, I reckon if you were going to get anything signed by a TV star or movie star, this is probably the best bet that you could go with, because neither of these have a huge amount of value to begin with, but they're still something that you can call semi-significant. Now, if you got him to sign one of these, it definitely wouldn't decrease the value, but I reckon if you got a 9.8 one of this signed by Anthony Mackie, that would actually increase the odds, or increase the price of it. But like I say, I don't think this happens in most cases, and I think it is a very risky move getting your comic book signed by any sort of TV star or movie star. And that then leads me on to one of my final points, which is Certificate of Authentications and CGC or CBCS verifications. Now, for those of you who don't know, and I'm just going to put some books up here so they look nice. These are both books which I got signed for free at London Super Comic Con by Dan Slott. For those of you who don't know how CGC and CBCS verification works, I'm going to explain it now quickly. CGC will verify your books and give you a nice gold label, like you can see here in my Fantastic Four book. It's got a gold label to show that it's been signed. This verifies that the creator definitely signed the book, and the only time that CGC will do this is if one of their staff look and see that they witness that the book is being signed. Only then will they put it in that slab. CBCS offer the same service as CGC, but they also offer a service where I could send off this book, signed by Dan Slott here, no certificate of authentication, nobody saw him sign it for me. I could send this off to CBCS, and they will run a program to verify whether the signature is authentic or not. They will then send it back in a slab with a red label saying that it has been genuinely signed by Dan Slott, which removes almost all doubt from it. There are a lot of people who still don't trust that system, but I think for the most part, people do agree that CBCS verification works. Now, both of these services cost around 50 quid. Again, I'll put the US price up on the screen. So on top of however much you're going to have to get the book signed for, you're going to have to pay an extra 50 quid just so that someone tells you, yes, this was definitely signed for, which is a massive amount of money. Of course, this does take into account how much it costs to slab it as well, and the 50 quid figure comes out for just a modern book to get slabbed. That doesn't include high value books or Silver Age books or anything like that. That would cost a lot more. And the alternative to this is Certificate of Authentication, which you can see at the back here. Now, these are ones which are created by the company who are doing the signings. In this case, it's Midtown Comics. This is for my Edge of Venom verse, which you saw earlier. Now, these are a way of sort of proving that it has genuinely been signed. A lot of people don't 100% trust these because you can, of course, take them out and put them into another comic book. So that is one way that people can do it, or they can print fake certificate of authentications. But it's a step up from just having this signature here and saying, hey, trust me, I wouldn't lie to you. Why would I lie to you? So when you are selling these signed comic books, you need at the very least a certificate of authentication, and even then people may be unsure as to whether it's the real thing. There are some ways around certificate of authentications, or certificate of authenticity. I've been saying authentication and it sounded like such a big word, and I've realised that's because I've been saying it wrong. It's certificate of authenticity. Oh dear, I sound like an idiot. There is a way to prove this is the genuine one, and that is I've got a Dark Child, The Diary, issue 1 here, which is signed by Randy Queen. Here's the certificate of authenticity, and here is a seal. This seal shows that the bag, which is in really poor condition, hasn't been broken, and the certificate of authenticity still remains in there. And that is a way of proving that the certificate of authenticity belongs to this comic book. But at the same time, there isn't really a way of saying that this is genuinely it. You've just got a piece of paper saying, hey, trust me, it really is. So I think overall, getting your comic book signed, unless it's for your personal collection and unless it's a massive, massive name like Stan Lee, it can be very risky if you want to make a return on it. And to be honest, I would only get a comic book signed if you would be happy with keeping it in your own personal collection anyway. When you're doing it for investment purposes, unless it's those big names, it is very, very risky. And yeah, I think that brings the video to an end. Sorry if this wasn't useful. If this was useful, let me know. I sort of want to start a bit of a discussion. Let me know what... I cannot use my words. Let me know what you think of comic book signatures, when you think they're worth it, whether you like to get your comic book signed, what your favourite signed comic book is, and what you think about TV stars and movie stars putting their signatures on comic books. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. In the end, I think, unless you are getting it for your personal collection, don't spend money on getting your comic book signed, or at least don't spend silly amounts of money. Don't spend 80 quid on a Frank Miller signature, because you won't get a return on it. Unless it's for your personal collection, go for it, go for it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought in the comments. If you're new here, please subscribe. I put out about 3 videos a week, and I do a giveaway video every Saturday, which is today, so stick around to the very end and you could win a free comic book. Who knows? Who knows? I'll see you guys in the next one.